You think he's kind of right. He's smiling in pictures, posting late night stories, even pretending like you never existed. But here's the thing most people never tell you. Silence, it's not indifference, it's data. It speaks volumes if you know how to read it.
Welcome to a video that's about to flip everything you thought you knew about breakups on its head. Because he might be pretending to move on, but his silence is leaking the truth. You see, men are taught to suppress emotion, not express it. So while you're replaying conversations and drowning in overthinking, he's quiet, eerily quiet. But don't mistake that stillness for peace. That silence, it's his cover, and underneath it, there's conflict, confusion, and often a connection that hasn't fully died. If you're sitting there wondering, why hasn't he called? Or why does his silence hurt more than his words ever did? You're in the right place. Because by the end of this video, you're going to learn how to decode every unspoken signal he's sending you, even without saying a word. And the best part, once you understand what silence really means, you'll no longer wait for closure. You'll create it. You'll no longer chase reassurance. You'll become it. So before you text him again, before you try to get clarity from someone who's gone ghost, watch this, because silence isn't the end of the story. It's where the real story starts. You've probably seen it. He disappears from your life, maybe after a breakup, maybe after pulling away emotionally, and within days he's suddenly everywhere. Posting at the gym, laughing in stories, surrounded by people you've never seen before. It looks like he's fine, like he's thriving. But here's what you need to understand. Most men don't actually move on that fast. They just become experts at pretending. From the outside, it looks like he's over it. But if you zoom in, the performance starts to break down. He watches your stories, but never replies. He unblocks you out of nowhere, without saying a word. He posts a song that meant something to both of you, or likes an old photo, just enough to catch your attention. These aren't coincidences. They're signals, emotional slip-ups that reveal he's still tethered to you. Whether he admits it or not, he's not healed. He's hiding. Because for a lot of men, silence isn't strength. It's avoidance. They don't process in the same way. They don't vent to friends. They don't journal or cry on the couch. They dive headfirst into distraction. New routines, new people, new noise. Not because they've moved on, but because they can't stand the silence that comes with truly being alone. When he starts dating someone new days or weeks after you end things, it's not always because he's found a better connection. Sometimes it's just to prove to himself, to you, to the world, that he's desirable, unbothered, untouched. But deep down, he knows. Because a man who's genuinely at peace doesn't need to perform peace. He just lives. And here's where it gets interesting. When you stop chasing, when you go silent, when you reclaim your energy, that's when his mask starts to slip. That's when the posts become more specific, the glances more obvious, the silence more loaded. He might not reach out, he might not say the word, but everything about the way he moves starts pointing back to you. So if you're wondering whether he's really over it, watch how he handles your silence. If he's calm, content, consistent, that's detachment. But if he's subtle, unpredictable, indirect, he's faking it. Because deep down, his emotional attachment hasn't gone anywhere. It's just hidden under ego, fear, and confusion. Don't fall for the show. The louder he tries to look like he's moved on, the more you need to understand what that actually means. Real healing is quiet. It's stable. It's grounded. But pretending always cracks under pressure. And if you pay close enough attention, you'll see the emotional truth he's trying so hard to cover up. Now that you understand the patterns behind fake detachment, let's go even deeper, because up next, we're going to break down exactly what his silence means after the breakup, and why it's the one thing he can't fake. Silence after a breakup can feel like the most painful kind of noise. It's not just the absence of communication. It's the uncertainty, the mental spirals, the space where hope and heartbreak fight in silence. You're left wondering, is he done? Does he miss me? Why hasn't he said anything? But silence, especially from a man, isn't as empty as it seems. In fact, it's often where the real emotional truth hides. Men are rarely taught to process emotional pain out loud. Instead of expressing it, they internalize it. Instead of reaching out, they retreat. So when a man goes silent after a breakup, it doesn't always mean he's over you. It often means he's overwhelmed by feelings he doesn't know how to navigate. The psychology behind this is simple. Silence is easier than vulnerability. Reaching out means facing his emotions, yours and the consequences of what went wrong. But disappearing, that gives him the illusion of control. The silence becomes a shield. He can avoid saying something wrong, looking weak, or admitting that he still feels something he's not ready to deal with. But here's where it gets interesting. Not all silence is created equal. Sometimes his silence is punishment. He's hurting and wants you to feel it too. Sometimes it's confusion. He doesn't know if reaching out will pull him back into something he's trying to emotionally escape. And sometimes his silence is fear. He's afraid that if he opens the door again, even a little, he'll lose whatever strength he thinks he's built up. And yet, if he truly felt nothing, if he were truly free of emotional attachment, there wouldn't be hesitation. There wouldn't be tension in the silence. It would feel final, not unfinished. But when a man goes quiet and it feels loud, when that silence starts to feel like it's saying something he can't, it's usually because it is. Men who are still emotionally attached tend to send signals through absence. They won't message you, but they'll watch your stories. They won't say a word, but they'll like a post from 3 weeks ago. They'll say nothing, but they'll make sure you feel their silence. That's not disinterest, that's emotional leakage. Here's what you need to remember. Silence doesn't always mean he's moved on. Sometimes it means he doesn't know how to move through what he's feeling. And in that space of confusion, his silence becomes a test. Will you reach out first? Will you break the tension he created, just to relieve the ache he's too afraid to face? But that's not your job anymore. Silence might be his way of holding on, of waiting, of hoping. But your power lies in recognizing it for what it is, not absence, but avoidance. And if you've been wondering whether he's still emotionally attached, the next part will make things crystal clear. Because silence may hide the words, but behavior always tells the truth. He says nothing. She's gone quiet. He hasn't reached out. And maybe part of you is trying to accept that as closure. But something doesn't feel finished. Something about the way he left, the way he watches from a distance, the way he lets the silence stretch too long, but never fully disappear. It lingers. Here's the truth most people won't tell you. A man doesn't need to speak to reveal that he's still emotionally attached. You just have to learn how to read what's unsaid. If you're paying attention, the signs are everywhere, and they're louder than words. Sign number 1. He's watching you more than you think. Maybe he's the first view on your stories. Maybe he's lurking through a fake profile. Maybe you notice his friends showing up in your online spaces. That quiet digital presence. It's not random. It's emotional surveillance. He wants to see if you've moved on, if you still think about him, if you've forgotten. When someone's detached, they don't track your life. They release it. Sign number 2. He reacts emotionally when he sees you with someone else. Even if he's been quiet for weeks, suddenly he unfollows, blocks you, or posts something reactive. That spike in behavior isn't confidence, it's emotional conflict. Jealousy is a powerful indicator that the bond isn't broken. It's not about control, it's about unresolved connection. The third sign, he reaches out, but only when he senses you're slipping away. It's not consistent contact, it's a hey after weeks of silence. A comment on your photo when you finally stopped posting about pain. He can feel the emotional tether loosening, and his ego or his heart won't let it snap completely. It's not always love, sometimes it's just fear of losing your energy. Fourth, he leaves emotional fingerprint. He brings up inside jokes in public posts. He shares a quote you once sent him. He casually drops breadcrumbs hoping you'll pick them up. These aren't coincidences, they're attempts at invisible connection. He doesn't want a conversation, he wants presence, yours. And the fifth sign, he hasn't moved on emotionally, even if he has physically. New relationship, new girl, new distractions, it all looks like progress, but look closer. Is he moving forward, or just moving fast? There's a difference between healing and replacing. Real detachment is peaceful. Rushed attachment is almost always avoidance. The hardest part about emotional attachment is that it rarely announces itself. It hides in patterns, in timing, in pauses and reactions, and silence that feels like it means something. And often it does. So if you've been trying to make sense of his behavior, ask yourself this: is he really gone, or is he just watching from behind the curtain, hoping you'll be the one to break the silence first? Because when someone's truly moved on, they let go. But when they're still emotionally tied to you, they linger, they hover, and they leave behind traces of feelings they're not ready to face out loud. Stick with me, because next we're pulling back the curtain even more to uncover the psychology behind emotional detachment and why so many men confuse running with healing. There's a difference between letting go and locking it away, but from the outside, they can look almost identical. You see someone stop texting, stop reacting, stop showing emotion, and it's tempting to think they've detached, that they've healed. But more often than not, especially with men, what you're witnessing isn't detachment, it's suppression. Real detachment is conscious. It's the result of facing pain, feeling it fully, and choosing to move forward with clarity. Suppression, on the other hand, is avoidance, wearing a calm face. It's pushing everything down, bottling it up, and convincing yourself that if you don't talk about it, it'll stop existing. But emotions don't dissolve just because they're ignored. They store, and they show up later in unexpected ways. This is why some men seem perfectly fine after a breakup until they're not. They crash 6 months later, or suddenly spiral when something reminds them of you. It wasn't peace, it was delayed pain. Because emotional suppression doesn't erase the attachment, it buries it alive, and anything buried eventually finds a way to surface. You'll see it in the way he overcommits to distractions, the way he talks about you like he's indifferent, but his eyes flicker when your name comes up. You'll feel it in the silence that isn't still, but heavy. Suppression often disguises itself as strength, but true strength comes from vulnerability, and most men were never taught how to sit in that space. For many, emotional detachment is a goal, but suppression becomes the shortcut. It's easier to shut down than to slow down. Easier to pretend it didn't matter than to admit it still hurts. But that shortcut leads to emotional stagnation. He might move on physically, but not emotionally, and that's why he still checks in from afar. That's why his new relationship feels rushed. That's why he still reacts when you pull away. His body moved on, but his heart is stuck in a moment he never processed. The psychology behind this is layered. Men are often wired to be solution-focused, not emotion-focused. So when a breakup happens, they don't sit in the grief. They try to fix the discomfort. That might mean replacing you, numbing with work, over-socializing, or pretending they were never invested. But deep inside, the unresolved attachment sits, waiting for a quiet moment to resurface. And when it does, when the noise fades, when distractions fail, when the silence gets too loud, that's when the truth hits. Not because they didn't care, but because they never let themselves fully feel. So if he seems cold, detached, or distant, don't always assume it's because he doesn't care. Sometimes it's because caring would hurt more than he's ready to handle. And rather than deal with it, he disconnects from it. Not from you, from the part of himself that loved you. But eventually, even the strongest walls crack. Suppressed emotion doesn't go away, it just waits. And in the waiting, it reveals everything he thought he buried. Up next, we'll explore what happens when silence becomes a power play, and how to recognize the difference between distance and manipulation. Silence isn't always space. Sometimes, it's a strategy. And in the hands of someone emotionally conflicted or emotionally manipulative, it becomes a weapon. What starts as distance to process a breakup slowly turns into a silent power play, where control speaks louder than closure. When someone uses silence intentionally, they're not just avoiding a conversation, they're shaping the emotional atmosphere. They know that saying nothing forces you to fill in the blanks. It creates anxiety, uncertainty, longing. It keeps you emotionally anchored, constantly checking your phone, replaying moments, wondering what you did wrong. That kind of silence isn't about healing. It's about holding on to invisible control. This is when silence shifts from emotional protection into emotional leverage. He knows you're still invested, and by pulling away without explanation, he gets to watch your reaction from a distance. He doesn't have to chase you. He just has to do nothing and let the silence speak for him. Because sometimes the absence of closure keeps someone hooked longer than the presence of honesty. Psychologically, this tactic plays on the human need for resolution. Our brains are wired to seek answers, especially in emotional conflict. When someone disappears without clarity, it leaves you suspended in what-ifs and unfinished business. And for someone who wants to maintain emotional power without responsibility, that's exactly the point. What makes this silence so damaging is how subtle it is. It doesn't come with cruelty or harsh words. It doesn't look like manipulation on the surface. In fact, he might seem calm, unbothered, even mature. But beneath that stillness is a calculation. If he stays silent long enough, you'll be the one to break. You'll be the one to reach out, to apologize, to reopen a door he quietly closed, but never locked. And when you do, it reinforces the dynamic. He pulls away, you chase. He goes quiet, you explain. Over time, this creates an emotional imbalance, where his silence dictates your behavior. Not because you're weak, but because you're human. And silence from someone you cared about doesn't feel neutral. It feels loud, personal, and unfinished. But here's the truth that sets you free. Real connection never relies on emotional game. Someone who respects you doesn't need silence to feel powerful. They communicate, they show up. They either choose you or release you, but they don't hold you hostage in uncertainty. So if his silence feels intentional, if it comes right after you set a boundary, right after you stop reaching out, or every time you regain your strength, that's not distance, that's manipulation. And the most powerful response, refusing to participate. You break the pattern by no longer reacting to the silence, by realizing that if someone needs your confusion to feel in control, they never had real control to begin with. And once you see silence for what it is, not just space, but a signal, you stop chasing clarity from someone who benefits from your confusion. Up next, we'll talk about how to respond when you sense that emotional attachment is still there but no one's saying a word. When someone stays silent but still carries emotional attachment, it can feel like walking a tightrope, uncertain, exhausting, and full of questions. You want clarity, but the silence leaves you stuck in a loop of wondering. So how do you respond to that silent attachment without losing yourself or getting caught in emotional limbo? First, understand that his silence is a language, one loaded with meaning. It's not just empty space, it's a signal. He might be confused, hurt, afraid, or even hoping you'll reach out first. But your response matters more than his silence ever will, because it sets the tone for what's possible next. The key is to reclaim your power through intentional calm. Instead of chasing him or filling the silence with anxiety, choose to create space for yourself. This means no overanalyzing every unread message or refreshing his profile to look for signs. It means grounding yourself in what you want and need, not just what his silence suggests. Responding to silent attachment isn't about breaking the silence by any means necessary. It's about deciding if and when you want to engage, and doing so on your own terms. If you choose to reach out, make it clear, direct, and without emotional bait. Say something simple and honest like, "I feel like there's a lot unsaid between us. I'm open to talking when you're ready." This kind of message honors your feelings without putting pressure on him, and it shows you respect yourself enough not to chase. But more importantly, be prepared for any response. Sometimes silence ends with clarity. Other times it deepens the distance. Neither outcome defines your worth or your path forward. What matters is that you don't let silence dictate your self-esteem or your healing. If he continues to stay silent after you've made your intentions clear, that's a sign to turn your focus inward. Silence can be a sign of emotional attachment, but it can also be a form of avoidance. If he's not willing to communicate, that's not your burden to carry. Your energy is precious. Choose to invest it where it's valued and reciprocated. In the meantime, fill your space with things that remind you of your strength and growth. Connect with friends who support you. Dive into passions that make you feel alive, and give yourself permission to heal on your own terms. Silence is powerful, but your response to it is even more so. Remember, responding to silent attachment is less about fixing him, and more about respecting yourself. It's about recognizing that emotional connection isn't a one-way street, and your peace shouldn't hinge on someone else's silence. When you step back with clarity and confidence, you create an unshakable boundary. That boundary says, "I'm here, I'm open, but I'm not waiting forever." And sometimes that's the message that finally breaks the silence for good. Up next, we'll uncover the final truth about emotional attachment and how silence can either bind you or set you free. Deciding whether to reach out or let go after a breakup, especially when silence is involved, is one of the hardest questions you'll face. That silence isn't just empty space. It's a mirror reflecting your deepest fears and hopes. So how do you know when to break that silence or when to close the door for good? The truth is, there's no one-size-fits-all answer. It depends on a mix of timing, your emotional readiness, and the reality of the situation, not the fantasies or what you wish could happen. Reaching out can be healing, but only when it comes from a place of strength, not desperation. Letting go can be freeing, but only when you're truly ready to release the emotional hold. If you find yourself thinking about reaching out, pause. and ask why. Is it because you want clarity, closure, or a genuine chance to reconnect? Or is it because the silence is unbearable and you're seeking relief from uncertainty? The motivation behind your urge matters. If you're reaching out just to ease the ache or out of loneliness, it's likely to leave you feeling even more vulnerable. Before you send that message, check your heart. Are you prepared for any outcome, including no response? Because reaching out opens a door. It doesn't guarantee someone will walk through it. You have to be willing to accept their silence, their indifference, or their honesty, even if it hurts. On the other hand, letting go doesn't mean you have to forget or erase the past. It means choosing your peace over the pain of waiting. It means prioritizing your emotional well-being instead of holding on to what could have been. Letting go is an act of self-love, even when it feels like giving up. It's about recognizing that sometimes the best way to honor what you had is to allow space for new beginnings. But letting go is often the hardest path because silence leaves so many questions unanswered. It invites doubt and fuels what-if scenarios. To move through it, you have to create your own closure, not from their words or actions, but from within yourself. That means accepting that some questions won't be answered and some doors won't reopen. If you're unsure, a helpful approach is to focus on your healing first. Spend time rebuilding your sense of self outside of the relationship. Connect with your values, your passions, and your support system. When you feel grounded and whole, the decision to reach out or let go becomes clearer and less urgent. Remember, reaching out doesn't have to be a grand gesture. Sometimes a simple, honest message, without expectation, can bring peace. And sometimes silence is your signal to protect your heart and move forward. Ultimately, whether you choose to reach out or let go, your power lies in the choice itself. It's your chance to take control of your story instead of letting silence write the ending for you. Whatever you decide, make it from a place of self-respect and emotional clarity. Because true healing doesn't come from someone else's response. It comes from your willingness to honor your feelings, trust your instincts, and believe that you deserve peace, silence or not. Clarity and closure, they sound similar, but they serve very different purposes in healing from emotional attachment and silence after a breakup. Understanding the difference between the two can change everything about how you process the end of a relationship and how you reclaim your peace. Clarity is about truth. It's the facts, the honest conversations, the what happened moments that bring understanding. Clarity helps you see the situation for what it really was, not what you hoped it could be. It can be messy, uncomfortable, and sometimes painful. It's necessary if you want to make sense of the past and avoid repeating the same patterns. Closure, on the other hand, is a feeling. It's the sense of finality, the emotional resolution that allows you to let go. Closure isn't always something you get from the other person. It's something you create within yourself. It's the inner peace that comes from accepting what you can't change and deciding to move forward anyway. Here's the challenge. Many people chase clarity because they think it will bring closure. They want answers, explanations, or a conversation that makes sense so they can finally feel done. But clarity doesn't guarantee closure. Sometimes, even with all the answers, the heart still aches. Sometimes the truth is too complex or raw to neatly wrap up. And sometimes closure comes without clarity. Maybe he never explains himself, or he stays silent, or the answers you want don't exist. In those moments, closure becomes a deliberate choice, not waiting for someone else to give it to you, but deciding to find it on your own terms. That choice is powerful. It means you refuse to stay stuck in silence, confusion, or longing. It means you stop waiting for a conversation that might never happen. It means you take back control over your emotional journey, regardless of what he does or doesn't say. You might still feel sadness or even anger, and that's okay. Healing isn't linear, and closure doesn't erase the pain. But closure does create space. Space to breathe, to grow, and to open your heart to new possibilities. So as you process the silence and emotional attachment that linger after a breakup, ask yourself, are you seeking clarity as a way to hold on to the past, or as a step toward freedom? Are you waiting for closure from him, or are you ready to create your own? When you embrace closure from within, you step into your own power, you reclaim your story, you honor your emotions without letting them define your future. And that's where true healing begins. Remember, silence doesn't have to be the end of your story. It can be the quiet before your next chapter, the space where you rewrite the narrative on your terms, with courage and self-respect. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. If this video helped you understand the complex emotions behind silence and attachment, please like, share, and subscribe for more insights. Your healing matters, and you're not alone.